Dear subscribers and guests of the channel. This is Ruslan Baylov, and today, as always, we have a breakdown of the situation on the front and around it. Before we begin, a quick request. Subscribe to the channel and be sure to hit the bell, turn on notifications. The thing is, YouTube openly throttles military analytical content. Impressions get cut, videos simply don't reach you, even if you've been with us for a long time. So the bell is the one reliable way not to miss a new episode. And special thanks to everyone who supports the channel through Super Thanks. It means a great deal to us, thank you. Now to business. The past 24 hours turned out to be quite eventful in terms of advances. Let me ask you this. What does the Ukrainian army love most of all? I think you know the answer. Of course, ending up in cauldrons, ending up encircled. It's practically their passion. And today we have two such storylines at once. The first is the Lyman direction, and here everything has come apart for the AFU, Armed Forces of Ukraine. The picture repeats, point for point, what we saw in Costantinovka. Over the past day, the Russian army managed to expand its zone of control in the central part of Lyman, advancing more than 500 meters along Volhodonska Street, plus a small gain along Kalinina Street. But that's not the most important thing. What matters is that, from the central district, Russian troops crossed the railway, took the industrial zone in the southern part of the city, and reached the Pivdeny southern micro-district. And this is one of the key districts of Lyman, an area of high-rise development. What did that achieve? Part of the central and communal districts, the sections the Russian army does not yet control, have, in effect, fallen into encirclement. You'll say, hold on, there's still a neck of an exit here. This isn't like Costantinovka. Not quite. First, the neck is narrow. Let's measure it for clarity. About 1 kilometer 400 meters. Is that a lot? Not at all. That's 700 meters from each side, within range even of small arms, never mind drones. But it's not even the distance that's decisive. The decisive thing is that to get out of these districts, AFU soldiers have to cross the railway. And that's open ground. And right now that 1.5 kilometer stretch of railway is fully monitored by Russian FPV drone teams. You can't get out or in unseen across the embankment. So, yes, the AFU is encircled again, this time in Lyman. How many are blocked in there? Fewer than in Costantinovka, simply because the AFU had less infantry in the city to begin with. If around 300 men were caught in the ring at Costantinovka, here it's roughly 100 to 150. But that's no small number either. The key to the city is the southern micro-districts. If those high-rise sections fall, that's it. Whatever is left in the center and the communal district will come away quickly. All that remains is to finish off and clear the Zavodsky factory district, and Lyman passes under Russian control. I don't want to guess at timing, but the chances of taking the city by mid-July or by early August are quite decent. Let me clarify for the sake of precision, it's not enough simply to enter Lyman. To secure the city against counterattacks, the forests to the south have to be cleared. The whole stretch around the village of Shurov, with its recreation bases and so on. Until that's done, the risk of counterattacks remains, and stable, rock-solid control of Lyman is practically impossible without taking those forests. So full clearing is still a way off. But the progress of the last week and a half is colossal. Not long ago, the Russian army spent months stuck on the outskirts, and now more than half the city is under control. The West grouping, frankly, surprised here. I'll add, by a number of assessments, the Ukrainian side is going through a stage of denial about what's happening along exactly the same script seen in Pokrovsk and then in Kostiantinovka. The sentence for the Lyman grouping has, in essence, already been handed down. The second cauldron is the Costantinovka direction. Here the situation is even starker. The AFU has twice in recent months been encircled inside the city itself. The first time, in the southwestern part, and back then most of them managed to get out, abandoning their positions. But in the center it didn't work out that way. Right now several hundred soldiers are sitting in the ring. They attempt to break out almost daily, but they can't tear the encirclement open. According to information from the ground, this cauldron will soon be finished off. It's important to understand the flip side too. The encircled enemy, blowing up everything it can, is fulfilling a task of its own: the destruction of housing stock and infrastructure. That's an added burden for the city's later reconstruction. And Costantinovka is, in effect, the gateway into the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration and a staging ground for further movement westward. Moving on, the Kramatorsk direction. Here there are movements beyond the Siversky-Donets-Donbass Canal, and that's important. Remember, the Russian army took Tikhonivka 2 or 3 weeks ago. At the time I said, to draw any serious conclusions, you have to wait for action to the south and the north. And now it's here. To the north, troops of the south grouping crossed the canal, advanced 2 kilometers, and entered and consolidated in the village of Malinivka and along Priozerna Street. To the south, they took control of the village of Markove and the heights north of it. Taken together, this is an attempt to create a stable, broad bridgehead for a subsequent offensive on Kramatorsk. And the city isn't far. From the western edge of Tikhonivka to the airport is just 9 kilometers. But the logic here is this: after Costantinovka falls, the battles for Druzhkivka will begin, and that will most likely drag on for at least 6 months. During that time, there will be a chance to secure an approach to Kramatorsk from the east. And then the city can be pressed from both the east and the south, which is far easier than from a single direction. But these are prospects more likely for next spring. The battles for Kramatorsk are unlikely to start sooner. On the Sloviansk sector of this same direction, there's movement too. Russian units took Mala Peskunivka and advanced noticeably near Minkivka. Near Sloviansk and in Kramatorsk, road bridges were struck. Positional fighting continues along the Liz-Dolhy, Rai-Oleksandrivka line. The tempo was higher earlier and has now eased somewhat. In Rai-Oleksandrivka, the AFU still holds the western outskirts, but most of the village is under Russian control. Along the axis toward Kramatorsk, the distance to the city has shrunk to roughly 8 kilometers. The Dobropillia direction, here troops of the center grouping advanced almost 2 kilometers and took the village of Stepi, also known by its former name Kutuzivka. What matters? The village was already under control last year during the breakthrough toward Kramatorsk, then had to be given up in the course of a defensive operation, and now it has been taken again. But this isn't a one-off lunge, it's the result of long, grinding, multi-day work. On the map, this is a dangerous wedge into the AFU's defense east of Dobropillia. Kutuzivka lies 4 kilometers north of the settlement of Novye Donbass, whose capture was reported a few days ago, and 6 kilometers northeast of Dobropillia. The center grouping is bypassing this 30,000-strong town from the east in a wide envelopment. Taking Kutuzivka makes it possible to move west, to cut the T-05114 highway connecting Dobropillia with Kramatorsk, and to reach Anivka, the northeastern suburb of the district center. In parallel, Belitska, south of Novye Donbass, needs to be taken to straighten the front along the T-0515 highway. At the same time, forces are pushing toward Dobropillia from the west, from the direction of Hryshyn and Novoaleksandrivka. If the town can be squeezed from 2 sides, a large AFU grouping falls into the envelopment. Fighting also continues for Miran and north of Novoaleksandrivka toward Shevchenko. The scheme is the same one I've described more than once. Take Kucherev Yar, then Zoloty Kolodiaz and Rubizhny, cut the Dobropillia, Kramatorsk road, and bypass Dobropillia from the north. So the advance here is important and necessary. Now the sectors that weren't mentioned at the top of the episode. The Dnipropetrovsk-Zaporizhzhia direction. On the western flank of the Zaporizhzhia sector, a fierce fight for the low sky is underway. Drone teams are striking AFU concentrations in the tree lines north of Stepnohirsk. On the eastern flank, the Russian army continues to break through the defense along the Novoselivka, Lyubitske line, paying particular attention to counter-drone work and logistics. On the Dnipro axis, there's stubborn fighting east of Velika Mikhailivka, with the enemy being tested for strength along the Novoselivka, Lisna, Iskra line. In parallel, an evacuation of the Dnipropetrovsk region is reported. Mandatory evacuation has been declared in 23 settlements of the region at once, and in Sinelnikov district, mandatory evacuation of families with children has begun. The Kharkiv direction. Fighting is underway in Losivka and the adjacent forests. There are tactical gains in the area of Okremivka and Budaki. Despite shelling of forward positions, Russian units are pushing ahead in places by up to 900 meters. On the Kupiansk sector, the zone of control is being expanded around Kupiansk-Vuzlovyi and within the city itself. The Sumy direction. The intensity of fighting east of Krasnopillia isn't letting up, where AFU positions in Mikhailivka are being stormed. To the north, forests are being cleared on the approaches to the village of Velikai Prikil. Encounter battles continue in Ivolzhanska, Pisarivka, Novosich, and Bachivsk. A separate storyline is the systematic dismantling of logistics. At night, a mass drone strike was carried out on Trostianets, with targets being the railway infrastructure and fuel stations, which, according to the city's mayor, were completely destroyed in the raid. For context, it's in Trostianets, not in Sumy, that the most important railway depot on the Vorozhba, Sumy, Lyubotin run is located, where all the mainline locomotives are parked. And it's there too, along the stretch toward Okturka, that the key fuel stations of the Sumy-Kharkiv lateral route sit. The next ones are already in Bohodukhiv, but they were destroyed earlier. So the logistics of the AFU grouping in the North grouping's zone of responsibility are being methodically cut. Now the geopolitical bloc. I'll start with Finland. How short-sighted does a politician, how short-sighted does a country's elite have to be to turn a neutral country into a huge fat target? It was neutral, it joined NATO, and now Finland's parliament has voted to lift the ban on stationing nuclear weapons on its territory. Surely they must understand. In the event of any major flare-up in Europe, a NATO member country that has allowed nuclear weapons to be stored on its soil automatically becomes target number one. Finland is putting itself in exactly that position. Then again, it's as if everyone there has lost their caution all at once. Latvia's Prime Minister too was threatening Russia the other day, in the vein of, "Don't mess with us." Next, the results of the G7 meeting in Evian. As expected, at the summit, the globalists tried every way to sell Trump on Kiev's window of opportunity, playing on his psychology. Supposedly, he'd gain more this way and nullify all his prior criticism of Biden and the Democrats. Trump, as usual, gave no clear answer. He responded evasively, after which the press immediately ran with the line that he would supposedly support Ukraine. That's a preemptive move. If you take the bottom line, what did Ukraine get? Acknowledgement of the thesis that Russia is not winning from all 7 leaders, a photo with Trump, the first personal meeting in nearly 4 months, a British sanctions package against LNG tankers, a Canadian one against 160 shadow fleet structures, a British deal on enriched uranium for Energoatom for 2 years, and Trump's verbal agreement on a Patriot license. What did Ukraine not get? Money. Leaders didn't even discuss the $52 billion budget hole for 2026-2027. Specifics on air defense in the communiqué, 0. Signed Patriot licenses, 0. A new US sanctions package, 0. What did Russia get? A return to the pre-war status quo on American sanctions. The US Treasury's temporary licenses are expiring, and Trump doesn't plan to extend them. This isn't new sanctions, it's the cancellation of a temporary easing. Plus the British-Canadian strikes against the shadow fleet. And that's the more concrete and painful part. And the key nuance, the Americans themselves have a munitions crisis. On June 16th, Trump invoked the Defense Production Act precisely because of the shortage after the Iran war. Lockheed alone produces about 50 missiles a month for the entire world, while Ukraine expends 60 to 65. There's simply no point in issuing licenses. The bottom line from Evian: Europe pays and fights, Ukraine asks and hopes, the US bargains with both sides, Russia keeps the initiative on the ground. This is neither a victory nor a defeat, it's the cementing of the status quo. And the front carries on as before. Separately, Iran. According to Middle Eastern sources, the US and Iran are due to sign a memorandum in Switzerland on Friday. The key points: the parties and their allies cease military actions, including in Lebanon. Iran reaffirms its commitment not to develop or acquire nuclear weapons. The US and Iran resolve the question of disposing of enriched uranium stockpiles and discuss enrichment for Iran's nuclear needs, preserving the status quo of the program during the talks. The US lifts the naval blockade, introduces no new sanctions, and does not build up forces in the region. Iran ensures, free of charge, the safe passage of commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz for 60 days. The US unfreezes Iranian assets. In the event of a final agreement, the US withdraws its forces within 30 days and lifts all sanctions. A $300 billion fund for Iran's reconstruction is under discussion, along with a temporary sanctions exemption for oil sales. Commentary: by US intelligence's assessment, Iran is now able to close the Strait of Hormuz at any moment, dealing a serious blow to the world economy. And one CNN source flatly calls this a lever more powerful than any nuclear arsenal. The conflict showed that Iran can block one of the world's most important trade routes, and, if need be, use that again. Along the same lines, the US and the G7 countries, according to a French outlet, intend to set up licensed production on Ukrainian territory not only of air defense systems, but also of deep strike means. American companies will be able to issue licenses to European manufacturers. For now, though, these are statements, not signed documents. And briefly on Europe, Bulgaria has stated that it will not support a number of the EU's anti-Russian sanctions, in particular against the Russian energy sector and against adding Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Orthodox Church to the lists. As a reminder, the party of former President Radev, who calls for restoring relations with Russia, recently won in the country, and he has become Prime Minister. And finally, on a lighter note, in the British town of Ramsey, robbers extracted an ATM straight out of a building using a forklift, having first knocked through the wall. It happened at 3 in the morning. The ATM was loaded into a pickup and driven off in an unknown direction. While the forklift was abandoned on the spot, it had, as it turned out, been stolen shortly before the robbery. In the age of artificial intelligence, as you can see, there are still conservatives who rob institutions by the old tried-and-true methods. To sum up the day, advances across several directions at once, a number of settlements have passed under control, including Stepi and Mala Piskunivka, along with a significant area of territory. We're following the development of all events. Friends, subscribe to the channel. Peace and goodness to all. Be happy and healthy. This has been Ruslan Belov. See you in the next episode.